proud to be an American. And I want everybody to know that I'm an American. But our children have been robbed of their identity, of their pride. Because we robbed them in the schools. If your children came up in public school, it is very likely that they've been given an altered history of America. You see, in 1971, there was a man and his girlfriend that went up to the U.S. Capitol. And they set a bomb on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. And they backed off a good distance and they cranked that bomb off and blew part of the wall out on the U.S. Capitol. You could come in that time. You could come and go to the U.S. Capitol 24 hours a day. No security. And they blew part of the wall out and it had to be rebuilt. And Richard Nixon signed a declaration, a presidential order that said from this point on the United States Capitol will be protected 24 hours a day. Nobody comes in without going through a security screening. Well, that man and his girlfriend were eventually apprehended after they set bombs in other federal buildings and tried to blow them up. Because they were members of a homegrown terrorist organization called the Weather Underground. They were taking the trial, and on a technicality they were released, and the man said this. He said, guilty as hell, free as a bird, what a country. His name was Bill Ayers, and his girlfriend was Bernadine Dorn. You know the names? Mm-hmm. Know the names?
Yes.
They went back to Chicago and they got married. And after they got married, they tried to figure out what they were going to do with the rest of their lives. You know what they did? They edited textbooks. Yeah, for 20 years. They edited textbooks. The textbooks that our children used in the public school system. 30 years ago, there were 9 publishers of textbooks. Today, there are 2. By the way, you know who owns those two? Those 2 companies that publish textbooks?
Kaplan.
Muslims. That's why you get textbooks that have 1 reference to Christianity and 82 references to the influence of Islam in this country. Our children have been robbed of their identity because the history of this country has been altered, and they're not proud of it anymore. Because we sat back and watched it. The state of Texas became the biggest buyer of textbooks instead of the state of California, which got in fiscal problems and stopped buying textbooks. The state of Texas became the biggest buyer. The people in the state of Texas actually started reading the textbooks that their children were supposed to learn from. And when they read the textbook that's a history book for 4th and 5th graders, that in the entire year never used the term American but said global citizens. And when they got to the 7th and 8th grade, that same manufacturer of textbooks talked about the atrocities that America was guilty of, rather than the great things that America's accomplished in world history. They said, no, you're not teaching this to my children. And that's why this trial that's ongoing in Texas right now, people versus the State Board of Education, is very important. Because they're going back and they're saying, this is not going to be taught, change that, take it out, put something else in. Because we have lost our identity, because our children have been robbed of the history of America. Look, we haven't been perfect. Listen, when they said all men are created equal, did they really mean that? No, we had to fight a civil war. It cost us 600,000 lives. Blood of Americans in the sand all over America. To right or wrong, to make sure that all men had an opportunity. Is there racism in America? Absolutely. Absolutely. So find a better place. Find a better country than America. We need to be proud of who we are. And I am greatly concerned because we are losing our identity, we're losing our pride, and it really bothers me. Islam is a major threat to America because of this organization called the Muslim Brotherhood, which came here in 1962. Now let me say this. The 36 and a half years I wore the uniform of the United States. I support and defend the Constitution, including the First Amendment. And most Muslims in America do not want Sharia law. But there's a hardcore group of jihadists called the Muslim Brotherhood that is very much moving America towards Sharia law. Our natural allies in this fight are those Muslims in America that don't want to live under Sharia law. And we need to be reaching out to them. We need to be engaging them. We need to be drawing them in as part of the solution. And tell them that we will support them, we'll protect them if they'll rise up and say this is not our faith. We don't support this. We don't want Sharia law. The problem is they're silent. They're silent. In most cases because they're intimidated and they're afraid. As I told you earlier, 3% in 1917 were actually communists. 3% in 1924 were Nazis. But the brutality of the leadership drug the rest along. And that's what we need to be concerned about. We need to make these people our natural allies. And get them to become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Sharia law is coming to America in 18 court cases. 18 court cases. In 11 different states, judges have considered Sharia law and adjudicated the cases. Many of you saw on the news the one down in Tampa that just came out in the last 2 days. Where the judge down there has already said he's going to adjudicate a property dispute using Sharia law as a basis. Article 6 of the United States Constitution says this Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land. Nothing else can be considered. That's why states all over America, there are 19 states right now that are dealing with legislation that will say you cannot consider Sharia law in adjudicating court cases in this state. It's coming. 18 different cases in 11 different states. Judges have openly acknowledged that they consider Sharia law in adjudicating those cases. This is a very serious threat. And if you don't think it can happen in America, look at Europe. I already told you, Europe will be an Islamic continent by the middle of the century. And when it becomes an Islamic continent, they will have Sharia law. We must not allow that to happen. The fact is, we're ignoring the threat. We are simply ignoring the threat. When Nadal Hassan walked into a reception center in Fort Hood, Texas on the 5th of November 2009 and killed 13 people. In my mind, he killed 14 people because one of them was a pregnant woman. And wounded 40 more, yelling, Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! God is great. When a report came out on that shooting, they never mentioned the fact that he was a Muslim. And where was the Islamic community? Go to your Muslim friends. Go to the Muslims in your town, your community, and tell them, stand with us. We'll do all we can to support you, but stand with us and condemn this. Let me tell you something. I'm now an ordained minister. I'm going to be real clear on this. You know this bunch of knuckleheads down here in Kansas called the Waterboro Baptist Church that goes around protesting at funerals? I condemn them. This guy down in Florida was going to burn the Korans. That is not the Christian faith. That's 15 minutes of fame for him. It's got nothing to do with building the kingdom of God or glorifying Jesus Christ. It's got nothing to do with that. And the Muslims need to rise up and do the same thing with these people. We cannot allow Sharia law to be practiced in this nation. We're ignoring the threat. When the Department of Homeland Security comes out with a declaration to law enforcement all over the country that says the future threats to America are right-wing Christian groups, pro-life groups, Second Amendment groups, and returning veterans. The young men and women that are serving in Iraq and Afghanistan today, they're the future threats. Never says Islamic terrorist. It's a reflection of the fact that we're ignoring the threat. That leadership's not being honest with us. And it's not just the president or the Secretary of Homeland Security. It's at all levels. It's at the state and local level as well. We're ignoring the threat. Let me tell you one miscalculation they made. Well, the Imam Faisal Rauf, who, by the way, he's the Imam at the Ground Zero Mosque, Faisal Rauf, he has repeatedly called for Sharia law in America. Repeatedly said we must become Sharia. When he stood up and threatened us, and you ever see it? It was on national television. He finally, when he didn't get his way, he finally said, if we don't build this mosque, there will be uprisings, there will be violence. And that was the point at which 71% of the Americans polled said, hell no, you're not building that mosque. He thought that he had us so intimidated, so afraid, living in such fear, that we would let this happen. And I got to tell you, I was proud when people started voting and saying, no way, I'm not going to do this.